Hello everybody. I get a lot of requests from people who want me to create a base that you can land on a planet with. Okay, I'll show you a couple. I don't really understand the big deal. These are very easy builds, but I'm going to show you how I build them, and I'm going to give you some examples, and you can either use mine or build your own, because I'm going to explain exactly how I do it. Obviously, the very first thing you need to do is have enough retrojets to land safely. Now that's less than you might think, because you can just leave them on inertial dampening mode and they'll be the equivalent of at least 5 times as many as they actually are. This is empty, but this is also super slow. This can come down on 1 gravity at full, and it can come down empty gravity probably up to about 3 Gs. It's got a lot of internal cargo space. And as you can see, this is a car. One of the things that this base has is no physics objects. Having physics objects is a little bit dangerous when you're landing, so pistons and rotors and stuff. Those tend to jar rather badly when you actually contact the ground. If you're planning to have cars or fighters or hovercraft, you probably want to send them down separately on a dedicated landing craft, or with their own retro thrusters, rather than sticking them in the cargo bays here, because when you hit the ground, it does jar you, and those things will cause damage to the surfaces that they're on. So because this has no physics objects, it has a very low clearance on the front ramp, as you can see. Which means that you can't really drive around with this. I mean, you can, but if you hit anything, the ramp is going to get blown away. But if you do need to drive around, you can cut the ramp off and it drives around just fine. It's just an ordinary car. In order to stop this car, you want to raise your wheels up. Now, I've made a lot of these, and I used to automate this with timer blocks, but I stopped caring at some point, so now I just do it manually. You don't want to do it too fast, but you can do it pretty fast. And now you can see landing gears 5 out of 5, lock them in place, you are done. You're ready to go. Even if your undercarriage suffers a small amount of damage, like for example, we probably knocked a couple of hit points off the underside of that landing ramp, it's no biggie. I mean, who cares? So let's take a tour of this using our ever-popular observer mode. First thing you'll notice is that this car is very flat. There is not a tall 70s rocket coming down on its tail trying to balance. No, just drop something flat. As long as you aim for someplace flat, a flat thing is absolutely the best, because it won't tip if you're on a small slope, and it won't be finicky when you're actually contacting the ground. You just drop it and everything will work out. So that's why this is so flat. Second thing you'll notice is it does have some solar power and some oxygen generators, but since there's no physics objects allowed with this particular drop, there is no optimization. The sun will continually move out of position, and you're only going to get a small amount of real power and oxygen from those. Because of that, you might think of these more as things you can grind down and place on some permanent base if you need to. You don't have to keep these intact. And this entire ship is built specifically so that you can walk to every single location, and that means you can grind anything you need to grind. This is really great because even on worlds with a high level of gravity, you don't have to worry about being stuck without a jetpack. You can do everything here without a jetpack. One of the other things you'll notice is that we have these catchers on top, these collectors. Well, a lot of people seem to think that what they're going to want to do is fire supplies back into space. No, don't do that. Instead, the opposite is true. You might want to receive more supplies from space. So I built these droppers, and you can come in above and drop things down, and if your aim is good, there'll be no issues. Now, why wouldn't you want to fling things back up into space? Why would you ever want to? Just stick a gravity drive on your base, and then when you're ready to move, just jump back into orbit. Super easy. No reason to use thrusters to get into orbit, no reason to stay on the ground and fire crap into space. As you can see, this base has 2 parking spots for ships, and maybe 4 if you're really good about parking, and it's got 1 bay for a car, or 3 if you're good about parking. but none of those came attached. And as I mentioned, you don't want any physics objects, or you're going to cause damage to your ship when you actually land. So if I had a car in here, it would have bounced around pretty catastrophically when I actually hit the ground. You're going to want to drop that stuff separately, or use a merge block or something, but be careful. The way that we've got this landing, the way that we've got this ramp built, it is exactly even with the ground because these landing legs are exactly the right height. If we had used wheels for the whole thing, then this wouldn't be quite the right height, and we would have a hard time actually putting cars up onto it by driving them. You know, their wheels would have to jump a gap or something. In the back, we have a manual dump, just in case you need to access stuff without without going inside. Shall we take a look inside? Let's take a look inside. So here is the most basic piloting system. When I build these, I almost always build them in the exact same way, the exact same thought pattern. I have a central floor, and then I have exits below and above. Sometimes the exits aren't their own floors, depends on the size, but the basic idea is that there's a central floor that contains all of your important ingredients. This is a good way to design it because if things go awry, your core functionality is not compromised. So if we accidentally run over something and something punches up through the ground, these things are floating high up enough that they won't get hit. If something hits us from the side, there's enough stuff in the way that these things won't get hit. If something comes down from above, there's enough stuff in the way that these things won't get hit. So you're always going to have a functional assembler and refinery. Two assemblers and refinery. There's also an arc furnace hiding in here somewhere. Another thing you'll notice is I've left space for you to put in upgrade modules as you would like to, without needing to go outside. Obviously there's cryo and medical. Now let's go ahead and see what's above, the exit upwards. Now this exit doesn't lead to an actual exit. Instead it leads to a dark room that I haven't bothered to figure out what I'm going to do with, and the piloting area. This has a really great view. I think that a really great view forward is really important on these bases. Even if you don't plan to drive them around, it really adds a lot to the ambiance of a base to be able to look. And this would of course be the primary driving seat if you wanted to actually drive in first person. Oh, what's this guy? Why is this guy vertical? Well, I already mentioned that the jump drive can just take you back into space. There's no reason to use engines or fire things. That's how you do it. You just tape something to the wall pointed upwards, and you can jump into space. Now, I really crammed in these exits, as you can see. And some people might not like this design. They might think it's a little bit too claustrophobic or whatever. But as I said, these are not difficult designs, so feel free to make one of your own. And there we go. This is a facility which can handle 2 landers and and at least 1 car, probably closer to 3 cars. So it is ready to service whatever your needs are, but it doesn't come with any built-in equipment for grinding or anything like that. So I prefer this approach just because it's a lot easier to deal with. Dropping everything separately is a lot safer. But it's up to you. If you wanted to build something where you can package all that stuff together, you're going to have to be very careful with your maximum velocity when you hit the ground. And that's a little bit difficult without really overdoing it on the engines. This thing has I believe three heavy cargo containers, and an extra assembler and a couple of other details like that. This one is a much smaller vehicle that's built to support individuals rather than vehicles. So there's no place for a car to dock or a spaceship to land here. It also doesn't use landing legs, and this is what I was trying to say. If you don't use landing legs, then you can't build flush to the ground, but you can still build close enough such that a jump can take you up, at least in 1 gravity. This is a much smaller facility, and you can see that the core floor is very, very straightforward and basic. But it's all the same kinds of ideas. This is where all of our refineries and stuff are. And then there's the exit down here. And there's no actual exit upwards, but there is a second floor. And you can install whatever you need to install in order to get this to run the way you want it to run. Oh, I already installed upgrade modules on this one. That's fine. Ah! This one is also a little bit better on the ground. It's got a little bit better ground clearance. But as you can see, I didn't even bother finishing this one either. There's no lights. But I did go ahead and put in the automation for raising up these wheels and lowering them back down so that I don't have to do it by going into the menu. There we go. So this is a super easy thing to build. I mean, it's not as easy as, say, a fighter, but it's super straightforward to build these. All you have to remember is to have enough upwards thrust and to be flat. This is actually too tall, but I couldn't get it any flatter given the constraints I gave myself. You can see that these things drive around really, really well. There's not a whole lot of risk. The only problem with them is that the large ship wheels were not altered when the small ship wheels were, so they have a very bad slippery performance, at least until the devs remember they exist and fix them. Also, you definitely want to put gyroscopes in these. Gyroscopes make driving around so much easier in these large vehicles, and you're going to want to leave your retro thrusters on so that you can drift down important slopes rather than crashing. Now this one only has the two small retro thrusters and no thrusters in any other direction. So everything you see here, all of this mobility, is 100% wheel-based, aside from some basic downwards thrust to keep you intact. Now the other vehicle, the larger one, is certainly capable of doing this exact same thing. It just needs to have its ramp ground off. And once you've landed, you can modify these, so there's no difficulty in actually grinding that ramp off and putting in a ramp of your choice that uses physics objects. But as I said, physics objects are a little bit dangerous on the actual landing. I need to get back in. Oh no. I forgot to turn on the handbrake. Whatever. You get the idea. So, I've shown you two of my designs. Feel free to show me your designs. If you think that these designs are somehow interesting enough that you want to download them, let me know and I'll finish one of them up and publish it. But to me, these are super basic. They're almost uninteresting in how basic they are. So I'm not going to publish them unless there's some call for it. To those of you who kept asking to see my my landing bases, this is what they look like. They're pretty straightforward, and I'm pretty sure you can build just as well.